I am so pleased to be here today. It was definitely a wonderful day for me. I'm actually in the field of disaster management for the Bahamas. I work for the National Emergency Management Agency. And I'm hearing all of the talks. Everything is wonderful. But there's often talks about disaster management in terms of knowing what we've been through, how we're going to mitigate it, how we're tracking it, and how, anybody on the panel is, how do you see that in terms of trying to make sure that the Bahamas, given the fact that this particular island has been hit with so many previous storms, how do you see we going through trying to ensure that we can decrease the level of damage somewhat? We can track what's been happening from the shorelines, the intercities, the government structures in our entire process. This is a concern for me because I see so many wonderful things happening, but I often don't hear people talking about what are the disaster management plans for the country.
Oh, Kimberly, I guess it's you.
I'm glad you asked that question. I think that as technology takes front center, we're going to see more opportunities for qualified vendors. What we saw with Acklins and Inagua and Crooked Island in the aftermath of both Joaquin and Matthew is that Minister Glenys Martin was left high and dry because the lone vendor for Iridium satellite telecommunications, which is the vendor for the country, had outfitted Central Island administrators with consumer quality phones. The Bahamas Defense Force had been issued consumer quality phones. There are police quality that withstand storm issues. They come equipped with solar backup batteries. And the issue we've seen with a lot of storm damage to date has been largely communication centric. It took 2 weeks after Hurricane Andrew in 1992 for Nassau to figure out that half of Harbor Island had not sunken under the sea. We had a twilight bark of the British Marines out in the Atlantic, a guy on a boat in Nassau Harbor on a Prodigy account. Now, mind you, in the Out Islands we're creative, and we've had ham radios, forever. We're fine with CV sets. We're fine with what we call the coconut telegraph. But Nassau and Freeport and Abaco are largely considered first world cities. And I think you need to make sure that you're prepared in the first place, because the biggest issue with any storm relief is understanding what needs to be sent in. Spanish Wells is a really good example. We had fleets of boats that were going back and forth from north Eleuthera into Nassau to get supplies, but they were also the coconut telegraph telling Nassau what needed to be sent. So I think communications are going to be key. And again, stressing the need for vendors who actually know their market.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Can I say something to that?
Sure, go ahead.
We live in the age of information, data. We can actually know our past, anticipate our future. And there's something called 7 Ps, because technology solves a lot of the things that we have. Even in the Arab Spring, they took down the internet, and technology allowed them to communicate across the structure. And so what we have to do is we have to understand the structure. But the most powerful thing about where we live, we're not going to change, not climate-wise or even hurricane-wise. And the 7 Ps, proper, prior, preparation, prevents piss-poor performances.
Well, that's C. Alan Johnson. He rhyming all day. Go ahead from the audience.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Hilvin Cash. I'm enjoying the summit. My question I want to pose to the panelists that this can be, anyone can give their opinions. In a situation like Grand Bahama, I don't want to say Bahamas because some places in the Bahamas too are acceptable, but in Grand Bahama, we have an issue where people are less susceptible to technology. They don't want to change with the times. If you are placed in a position where you want to introduce a piece of technology or a device that can make a particular industry better, I don't want to go into details because my pitch is coming up next, but where you can introduce a device into to make things better or make life a lot easier, but people are saying, okay, we're not ready for this yet, or they don't want to change. How would you persuade them to make this change or this adjustment to make their business more efficient and more tech savvy?
I'll take that one first. One of the things, whenever you're developing innovative products, there's actually a book out there by Jeffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm. How many people have heard of that book? Jeffrey Moore describes this whole methodology of product adoption from a technology standpoint. You have what's called the early adopters or the innovators, early adopters. Then you have what's called the valley of death. Then you approach what's called the early majority, late majority, then the laggers. One of the things you have to understand as somebody who's introducing new technology into a market is that you have to develop a product in stages, and you have to recognize what stage you are relevant to the market and the market adoption. And so you have to understand what the innovators want in that product and what you have to deliver, what the early adopters want, and then you have to be able to cross that chasm. And that's where a lot of businesses actually fail, because they assume that the early adopters and the innovators want the same thing as the early majority and the laggers. And what you have to recognize as a technologist or a technology development company is that don't fool yourself and think that you're going to make a huge market push with a product that only appeals to those folks on the left side of that curve. So now what it requires you to do as a technologist or an innovator to really understand where the majority of your market is and to be able to deliver a product to that market. And I can guarantee you, if you have a new technology, you have to understand, you have to introduce products that solve problems. People don't buy technology, they buy things that allow them to solve a problem. And once you recognize what that market wants and what problems you're solving, and that market is large enough, then you have the opportunity to be successful. So keep that in mind. So if you're frustrated that things aren't growing, you might be on the left side of the valley of death. And you need to understand, how do you get across the chasm?
Thank you very much. We'd like to hear from some of the students in the room. Good.
Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Toussaint, aka Mr. Triple Dot. I have my own YouTube channel. I do music. Shameless plug in here. You can find that at Mr. Triple Dot XP. But what was brought up today, there was something that I was interested that was brought up today. Talking about adaptability, you gotta learn to like learning. What I've noticed growing up in school, what really irritated me as a student was the fact that I couldn't choose what I learned. It was always given to me. And if it's always given to me, if I'm being force-fed information that I don't want or that I'm not interested in, I am going to develop this habit where I don't like learning. And what I want to ask is that, because I don't know if it's going to be brought up tomorrow or anything, but what I do want to ask is, where do you all plan on developing the school system? Because, like you said, we are trying to govern a country with outdated policies and such, but we are also trying to teach students with school systems that were developed years ago. So where do you plan to develop our school system?
That sounds like a Kwesi Thompson answer. I mean, am I right?
I can comment a little bit on that. I agree with you. We do have to meet students where they are. And the educational system in the Bahamas certainly has to change with that paradigm shift. I had an opportunity to talk to Dr. Johnson a couple weeks ago when I spent some time in Exuma. And she mentioned that I think Alive has an innovation center that they're starting over at the University of the Bahamas, or BTC, one of the telecom companies. I think someone corrected me. It's Alive. I was right. They're starting the innovation center. I think that's a step in the right direction. I also think with the advent of Khan Academy, and someone joked to saying, I think it was you, President, you said Google that. Similarly, I think you do have tools that you can go ahead and like explore and learn on your own. To the comment around you being like someone's forcing information down your throat and you're not really interested or appreciative of the information that you are being subjected to, I can tell you, I think everyone on this panel would agree that we've been in a situation just like you, and 20 years later, we appreciate someone forcing that information down our throat. And the last thing I would say is, I was talking to Zerks last night. Reading is fundamental, and I remember growing up that we had door written on door. Kitchen had, everything had a label, essentially. I would close the bathroom door or I would brush my teeth and my times tables were there. But 15 years later, I was an electrical engineer. And so that type of reinforcement and making sure that education is priority, trust me, it is your way out of a paper bag.
I'd like to... I have a quick comment about being forced to learn things that you don't like. First year of university, I took a math course. And the subject was fast Fourier transforms. And essentially, some wild, crazy Frenchman thought that he would draw all these graphs and start subtracting cosine waves from them, just to see what happens. And that's called a fast Fourier transform. And I thought, what the hell? I mean, I am never going to use this. Fast forward, I was working for a General Dynamics company in military weaponry. We had to find Soviet subs in the Baltic Sea. Every time the sub turned, there was a 30 hertz signal for the rudder. How do you find it? You drop a microphone into the water and you do fast Fourier transforms. But even better than that, I have a second story of fast Fourier transforms, because in May of this year, Formula One, Mercedes, and Tata Communications issued a connectivity challenge. There's one of the presenters here who said, let's have a connectivity challenge and pay them $1 million, and then we own all the ideas. Formula One had one of those. And I thought, I can win money. I know stuff. And it was an IoT internet connectivity challenge, but I told them that the internet was not fast enough for Formula One. What they had to do is put all of these sensors on a radio wave. They can take the radio wave, use fast Fourier transforms to get all of the data back. The good news is I'm flying to Abu Dhabi on November the 20th to pick up my check.
Can I just hear from Gadrin Higgs, since you already had something?
Absolutely. So you mentioned that so first of all, the educational system as it is, I think faces its challenges all over the world, right? But what I would want to say, and it's a slow-moving process, so don't expect rapid change there. I think that's a fair statement. But what I do want to say is that there's a lot of learning that you can do sort of on your own, right? As someone mentioned, reading. You're already connected to the internet and YouTube. So, I mean, YouTube is amazing. They upload over, I think it's 400 hours of content every minute. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But you have access to Khan Academy, all these online learning platforms where you can learn the things that you want to learn. I have a story about learning some things even in grad school that was very difficult for me, and it's not a fast Fourier transform, although I did take that class that you're talking about, and it wasn't fun. But you think that's tough? In my grad program, I did a quantum mechanics, and trust me, what you're learning right now, enjoy it, because when you get to a program like that, you can't tell the dean of the university, I'm not interested in your quantum mechanics program if it's on the course, right? So take it for what it's worth. And I would love to tell you that, quantum mechanics, my last name Higgs, physics, it's all connected to the Higgs boson, but it's not true. I don't have that type of a story to share, but just going through the experience really teaches you a few things, one of which is just discipline. Discipline is super important, so even though you may think that what you're learning right now, you may never use again, you never know, because the future can behold anything. Try to look at it as an opportunity for you to connect with other individuals who are learning the same thing. Build networks of individuals. Learn how to do things that you haven't done before. Try to stretch your mind. Try to think creatively. Try to think collaboratively. Don't just fixate on what you don't like about it. Try to spend time thinking about what you do like about it, and that'll be a tremendous asset to you in the future.
30 seconds. Just,
You can go ahead, see.
just shut.
You can bring that.
On a policy recommendation, I would suggest that the government consider a policy of school choice or some hybrid there is that allow the private sectors or individuals to create the learning environment for students can go to targeted magnet school or whatever it is that they particularly want, and it goes on demand, and just consider some variation of that.
Thank you. Shadon.
Sure, and I don't want to be a dead horse, but your question resonates with me, and it's one of the reasons why I started, again, the blog about not screwing up your career. So, unlike the esteemed folks on the far left, I was not quantitatively inclined at all. I mean, like negative, right? Negative inversion on that, right? To the point where I actually exploited a loophole in my college curriculum that allowed me to graduate from college without taking math, right? It was amazing. It was amazing, right? There was a natural science requirement, and I figured out, oh wait, so I could take math or I could take astronomy, right? And at the time, I hated math so much that I thought, let me just take astronomy and I'll never have to deal with math again, right? And it worked great until maybe about 4 years later when I was going to business school. Because in business school, to get my MBA, that first semester, I had to take statistics, accounting, economics. Wait, what? It was statistics, economics, accounting, and something else, all at the same time, right? And for everyone else, it was somewhat of a review because they had taken math in college. Whereas for me, I'm burning the midnight oil learning statistics, accounting, and finance all at the same time. And it brought in that old saying that, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If I had just been courageous enough to fight through it earlier on, it would have made my life much easier later on. So don't do like I did. If you need any tips, again, ultimate guide to not screwing up your career, because there's great opportunities for folks who aren't afraid. And to the point that was made, there are so many things that I was forced to learn later on that I'm so thankful somebody forced me, because if I had my pick, I would not have taken the time. But now, just being able to combine all of those skills and that baseline of knowledge that wasn't interesting to learn, but is necessary to build on it to really reach those next levels, I'm super thankful.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, let's go back to the right of the room. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. John Bain. I just want to say thank you very much, Dr. Moxie, for the revision of Roger's theory of the diffusion of innovation about the laggards and the early adopters, etc. The point I'm making is very similar to that. Freeport has always had, and I put in quotations, potential. Everybody always knew, Freeport built, because the forefathers of Freeport were visionaries. They were able to build infrastructure that took us years ahead of when they built it. So Freeport always had this thing. It's going to happen soon. So when we talk now about the new Freeport, the technology center, to me, it's the same thing. Freeport always was gone. They was gone, but it never happens. So, talking about the diffusion of innovation. So the innovators, us here, we want Freeport to be a technology hub. Yeah? You said that we got to be able to sell this idea to go beyond the curve, whereby the early adopters like it, the early adapters, and then it goes over the curve with the late adapters and the laggers, etc. So we got to go beyond the curve. What can we do to try to minimize our chance or our risk of failure in terms of making Freeport get it? Because even though we want it as innovators, it mightn't sell. We may not be able to attract those companies, those international companies here. What is it that we could do to minimize our risk and to ensure that we stand the best chance? And because all you guys spoke about, Freeport has the infrastructure, Freeport is very near, 2020, our location is so near, 68 miles. Yeah, we know that. But Africa has gold, diamonds, all kinds of stuff, and they still fail it. You know what I mean? So we do have it. What can we do to make sure that this thing happens? Thank you.
Great question. I'm going to start and answer the question by asking just a simple question. I know James knows the answer as well. How many of you have heard of an area called Research Triangle Park? North Carolina. Okay, that's in North Carolina. That's where I went to grad school. That's where James went to school as well. NC State, went to St. Aug. But here's the thing. When you talk about, and what they did, they started RTP back in the 50s and the 60s. Back then, there was just a bunch of land between Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. Okay? And so the people who owned the land said, you know what? We want to create RTP to be a research and development hub for the Southeast. Now, how do you do that? Same thing for Grand Bahama. You want to make it a tech hub. So the first thing you need to understand is that who are the constituents that are going to help make that happen? In the RTP case, it was the landowner, it was the universities, and it was the government. And let me show you how those all things come together. If you look at the landowner, there's a bunch of land that everybody owned, just this huge space there. The second thing was, so that was available and readily available. The second thing was the universities. We had the universities, NC State, Carolina, and Duke, all within 30 miles of each other that had research programs going on. So these individual universities got research dollars from the federal government. They had a lot of graduate students, a lot of R&D that was going on. Then you had the government, state of North Carolina. So the whole question was, how do we get businesses to relocate to North Carolina to do their research and development? How do we make that happen? Because prior to that, a lot of R&D that was done in the US was done in the Northeast. So you heard of things like Poughkeepsie, New York, and a lot of those things up in Buffalo and around the Northern Virginia area. That's where a lot of the R&D was done, in the Northeast. So what the government did is they said, you know what, let's create policies that allow these organizations to come down here, get land for next to nothing, essentially, benefit from the universities that are here, create pro-growth policies, and allow them to come in. Now here's what happened. You had IBM, came in from Manassas, Virginia, started to relocate and brought people down to RTP. Pretty soon you had people like Burroughs Wellcome. You had a number of different R&D companies that came down because you know what? These companies are in competitive market space. Once they saw what IBM did, everybody said, you know what? They're my competitor. I want to make sure that I am doing what they're doing because we have to compete. So once the government, once the private sector, and once the university environment created that environment for those R&D companies to thrive, the first big one came and everybody else followed. Because they want to be where their competitors are. And RTP began to grow and to flourish. And if you do any stat in the US for the highest concentration of PhDs in the United States, is in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. So what has to happen, if you summarize it here for Grand Bahama, is that you have several stakeholders here. You have the Port Authority, which owns a lot of land around here. You have the government, and you have the people, and now you have University of the Bahamas, which has a northern campus here. So now the question becomes, what is it that the stakeholders who are here now can do from a policy perspective that will create an environment that will attract technology companies to this area? All you need to do is figure out what has to be done, go out, sell it, make it known, and all you've got to do is get that first elephant to come, right, or a series of very innovative people to come. Once you do that, everybody else will come. But it takes those stakeholders to get into the room, think strategically, put all politics aside and think about the future. And once you do that, and if governments do what governments should do, which means create an environment and don't interfere, then the markets will drive what's going to go on here from an innovation perspective.
I think Dr. Moxie hit it nail on the head. I don't know if any of y'all watched the movie Field of Dreams. You remember in the movie, I think Kevin Costner said, "Build it and they shall come." And I think that exactly is the point here. But I think also outside of that, from a project management perspective, coming out of these sessions, we need to come up with a strategic plan and develop milestones, short and long term, and develop a steering committee that we actually can meet with the minds here, not just local, but also international. And the thing is, what I realize a lot of projects I work on with private and public customers, we always tend to leave certain key stakeholders out of the conversation. And all of us here in the ICT arena are all stakeholders a part of this. Because at the end of the day, like Minister Thompson said, if once Freeport succeeds, we all succeed. So we all are stakeholders. So coming out of this seminar, the key is we got to develop that strategic plan that's going to take us to where we need to be.
I think one thing we do have to keep in mind is that we are a boutique. We are not India. And we're going to have a lot more success if we support each other than if we compete at the lowest price. I've built a number of incubators around, in empowerment zones around the United States, and the ones that succeeded because all of the participating companies supported each other, bought each other's products, weren't necessarily driven to only consume the least expensive option. In Harbor Island, we've crafted about 95 businesses in the last 20 years because we don't opt for the lowest common denominator. We understand the importance of buying Bahamian. We do it as much as we can. We look forward to developing the e-commerce platforms where we can sell Eleuthera pineapples on a friggin' online exchange. There's no reason why we can't. Everybody asks. You've got Don Ricardo rum here in Freeport. That's the best coconut rum in the entire world. There are markets waiting to be had, whether it's Sands or Kalik. Technology exports, branded, made in the Bahamas, made in Grand Bahama, is going to carry a lot more socioeconomic impact than made in China, as it should. And I think if we commit to a sustainable climate, both economically and technologically, we're way ahead of the game.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Because we're gonna take. Okay, that's 3, 4. Okay, those are gonna be. Oh well, we got another one in the back. Okay. Oh, gee. Okay. Let's try to do this quickly so we get everybody in. I guess I opened the floodgates, right? I asked you. Okay, let's go.
All right, I'm going to try to be very quick because mine is not so much a question as a statement. My name is Sheila Robinson. I'm a veteran teacher, and my qualifications are mathematics and ICT. I came here in 1989 to what was then Freeport Anglican High School and started a computer education program there. And some of the comments that you've been making that I really, really found interesting today, and I feel very positive about this whole summit. I'm so sorry that most of the students had to leave by now, including mine. One of the biggest problems that I have come across in the last 28 years teaching IT here is this lack of consistency and follow-through with the policies. The examination system completely needs revamping. At the moment, in the last term, I've taught in 3 schools on this island, Sunland, now BMES, and there we started the first primary computer program at Discovery, which is BMES now, Sunland, and Lucayan International. And each of those, I'm now back at Sunland again. In the last 3 schools, I've implemented Google Classroom. We use a Google Enterprise, which is free for education, for non-profit, for not-for-profit. All of our students and all of our faculty have email accounts, and administration and school board. And we are trying to go paperless as much as possible and green. My students that were with me today receive all their assignments via websites and use email to communicate. And they want to be engineers, computer technicians, and so on. And I think there's quite a lot of people still in the room that recognize me, including Mr. Thompson, who was in my first homeroom. A lot of the people that are now here as individuals who work in technology and own computer companies. But the individual is a key thing again, and I can't remember if it was Ms. Burns or Mr. Adley that raised that in your part. We are not seeing a lot of project management and team development, and that's something we're trying to work on in the curriculum. But curriculum change needs to be approved from the top, from the Ministry of Education. I am fighting to keep, and in fact I had to fight for the name change, ICT, in the curriculum and teaching it in the form of information technology in a global society. Because it isn't just about learning how to use the technology, it's how it impacts our daily lives and businesses and services like health, medicine, education, everything, and the social and ethical responsibility that goes along with that. So I was pleased to see words like the digital divide on the program, and I love the way, I had quite a few notes, but I really like the way you've all addressed it. I think it's so positive, and I just hope that government and ministry are listening to what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Andrew Conway. I am what someone earlier described as a digital nomad. I'm a consultant who's worked for the past 30 years for various companies in and around Silicon Valley. I'm trying to retire, but my clients won't let me. In the past 10 years, I've spent at least half my time here on Grand Bahama. And I think, so this is a very exciting presentation for me today. I would like to thank all the panel members. I'm particularly impressed by Dr. Moxie. Thank you very much, sir. I think it was Kimberly made a very important point that programming talent is out there, and let's not just restrict it to kids. So I'd like to ask the panel, what can we do? Oh, and I should say, I think it only takes about 6 months to be a good programmer. I told that to my number 2 son, who had a 2-year music degree and was trying to make a living as a musician, and he decided he wanted to make money. He took my word for it, and he's now making a 6-figure salary for a Silicon Valley startup. So 6 months, seriously. What can we do for the people who've already been through the educational system, but who may have programming skills that haven't been realized, to help them realize that here in the Bahamas? For the adults, the wonderful men and women out there who are maybe underemployed at the moment and could be programming or doing other jobs in high tech. Thank you.
I think what we can do is we can begin an aggressive build-out of technology enrichment centers in the communities that composes multi-use facilities throughout the Bahamas. And basically, it allows for learning, it allows for business development, incubation, acceleration, etc. And we could strategically place them on islands, interconnect them using technology where, say, someone like myself can be on Grand Bahama, engage those individuals in Eleuthera and other places. And so the information, the technology is there, the infrastructure is there, and we just need to embrace it.
Thank you. I think we have someone on the other side. Thank you.
So I don't necessarily agree that we need technology enrichment centers on all of the islands. I think Google did it best. We organize the world's information, and everybody has access to it, regardless of where they are in the world. There are, what's the MOOC? I think Coursera? Yes, Coursera is online. Udemy, online. Khan Academy. Any others that you guys know about? EDX. YouTube. Linda. I think every person here kind of knows at least one platform that someone can take advantage of. And where that really starts from is you actually having the initiative. Nothing was handed to anybody on this stage.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're asking what can somebody go do if they have these skills? They can go build something. And if they don't know, Yeah, be a magician. Go create something out of nothing. And if you're not quite sure what to go build, go just listen for a problem. Listen for somebody complaining about something. Take a step back and go, how could I fix that?
One of the things too, and this goes back even to the learning side of it as well. I mean, there's so much resources out there to learn, especially on YouTube, on the internet. You can Google things. And so if people want to develop, be developers or software developers, one of the very first things that I think needs to happen is sort of demystify this whole thing of developing software. It is not that tough to do, to tell you the truth. It isn't. So you have to say to yourself mentally, if you're a young person, listen, I want to develop software. You start fundamentally. You can go on the internet, go to YouTube, which is one of my favorite resources. I have to get a graduate degree. I want to learn something. I go to YouTube. Or I go to Google. You go through, you type in what you want, and you learn it. Now here's the thing. And I believe it's Dr. Higgs who said this earlier. And it's the same thing for me. Never stop learning. The best skill you can ever develop is a skill on how to learn things quickly. If I were to go through my background and what I've done, what I'm doing right now today has nothing to do with what I did my PhD in. Everything I did I had to learn after I finished my graduate degree. Everything. Remember the first software development I really did, and I kid you not, was at Bell Labs. I had done Fortran. Now this was a long time ago. And the project that I had to do was in C. Now let me tell you how funny it was. When Bell Labs did the interview for me, they had like a little cocktail party kind of thing set up. And they invited students and they talked and went around the room. And I thought it was the strangest thing. I'm like, when is the interview going to be? And they're like, okay. And I get a letter in the mail and say, you're hired. I'm like, what? I'm hired. Okay. So I show up there and they said, now we have a project, Donovan, where you have to do programming in C. I'm like, I've never done C. Okay, fine. Back then, now this is how old I am, they had courses on videotape. And they said, listen, you have to do an accelerated course. Go to our lab. We're going to give you a week, 8 hours a day. And you got to get through these courses. And then the following week, you've got to start now developing in C. So I had to do it. But because I had learned how to learn, I had learned how best I learned, I was able to learn those skills. And I did it very, very quickly. So, and one of the things that my supervisor at Bell Labs told me, he said, Donovan, whatever you do in life, no matter how old you get, never ever think you're going to have time to come back and learn something again. Always take advantage of the time you have at that specific moment. Because you will never have the opportunity to come back and relearn something that you should have learned. So anybody who's young, anybody who's old, even my age, I'm constantly learning things new all the time. You think about that. Because when we talked about earlier about it's a knowledge economy, that's exactly what it is. You are constantly learning. And I'll talk about one more pet peeve I have with my fellow Bahamians. You'll talk to a lot of Bahamians and they'll say, man, I have 20 years experience. Why are they firing me? Why I can't get promoted? Listen. If you have 20 years experience doing the wrong thing or the same thing over and over again, why am I going to promote you? Normally people who get promoted are people who demonstrate that they have the ability to learn and change. And if you don't have that mindset and think that because you could claim 20 years experience doing something gets you a promotion, you are thinking incorrectly. Okay? So we need to develop this mindset of having to learn constantly.
Thank you. Let's take
I just have a quick comment here.
Sure.
You talked about how we remediate adults and how to get adults into technology. And I'm of the frame of mind that you don't learn the old stuff, as Dr. Moxie said. When Thomas Edison invented the light bulb and all the phonograph and everything, he went upstairs into his attic and he took some string and he took some wax and some foil and he made some stuff. If you wanted to improve the phonograph in the 1970s or 80s, you had to learn transmission theory, transistor theory, you had to learn all sorts of acoustics and everything. It would take you forever. We are at a strange place now in technology where we have brand new emergent technologies that are coming out every single day. There's five core technologies. IoT, which you mentioned. There's the artificial intelligence. There's machine learning, which is different from artificial intelligence. There's blockchain, and then there's big data, which is analytics. So if we want to remediate some adults, The fields are now wide open. Half of the stuff isn't even invented yet. You have the ability to go for it. So don't, as he said, if you have 20 years of experience, don't try to learn that old stuff. Emerging technology, you can invent it. You can invent the future.
Okay, before we get excited here now, we do have another day of this conference tomorrow, and all of these panelists and some other persons will be here, and so we'll have the same opportunity tomorrow to ask questions. So I want to wrap up with two last. You can go.
All right, good afternoon. I have a simple question. Just wondering how we'll be able to keep track of everything here, because we have a lot of talk and stuff, but to actually see the progress manifest is a different thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question was, and I don't think they do either. So could you just start it again? I
just want to know how we'd be able to follow up on everything here, like after this whole summit has been completed.
Well, Kenai Media is recording this two-day event.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that's a Kwesi Thompson answer. How would you like to address that, Senator? Okay. He said he'll talk. He's taking some notes, and he's going to address that at the end of the conference tomorrow. If we could just take one more question here, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Ricardo Barrow, and I'm happy to see this summit take place. We've talked about a lot of things today, and particularly the first question was asked by the lady who works for NEMA. This question is to the panelists. They're moving modern technologies all around the world, and the Bahamas is trying to put itself on the stage to compete. We're talking about possibly moving into being involved in the World Trade Organization, and like other persons in the audience, there are a lot of questions. The silliest question is the one that's never asked, okay? So my question is, what redundancies do we have in place for major disasters within our own country, right? As she asked the question, because it affects not only our telecommunications, our economics, our education, our tourism, all these sectors are actually affected by disaster, okay? I think we've been spared the brunt of most of the storms that have just passed throughout our islands. So what is there in place presently, and can anybody confirm as to whether or not the infrastructure that we presently have in place in the Bahamas meets the requirements or according to global standards? Do we presently have that in place here in the Bahamas to say that we can sustain ourselves if we were hit with a Cat 5, Cat 6?
Mr. Alive is going to take that one. Join us on the stage, Mr. Alive. I'll even give up a podium for that one.
As I said earlier, the Bahamas has everything it needs, especially from a technological perspective, to do all this, and even through hurricanes. You have, through what we've done in Alive, an LTE network that is less than a year old. It celebrates its anniversary this next week. We have wireless data speeds on our network, typically of 20 megabits a second. It's a better network than exists in Miami or Silicon Valley, where the wireless network, half the time I'm there, doesn't work properly. There is fiber and redundant fiber from both providers off the island. Donovan showed the map earlier. The Bahamas is connected to the internet. From a connectivity perspective, everything is here. My team, the members of my team who've worked and lived in the region for many years between us, know all about hurricanes. We know about the devastating earthquake in Haiti. We have done everything to make that network as resilient as it can be. We've got backup power on every single site, and we've just gone through 2 tests, Hurricane Matthew last year, when we'd got the network up in Grand Bahama and New Providence, and this year. This year, we didn't lose any sites at all through the hurricane. We actually probably have a more resilient network than they've built in Florida. So everything is here from a technological perspective. Let's not look for the barriers, please. Let's look what we have and build on it.
I just have a quick statement on that.
Okay, thank you
Can I
very
make one
much.
comment? Can I make one comment?
Oh,
One
sorry,
comment.
go ahead.
So, Mr. Alive just mentioned that we do have the technology infrastructure in place. Donovan mentioned, Dr. Moxie, mentioned that you have to continually learn, and there's no point in being able to do the same thing. I've spoken to a lot of business people over the last 1.5 to 2 years in the Bahamas, and you spoke about resiliency, and it's very important, specifically to the young lady that works at NEMA, for you to have a BCP plan, a business continuity plan, right? The challenge, however, is that the IT specialists in the Bahamas are still operating in a very archaic way, so they're not moving ahead or changing with the tide. So for example, there's no reason why any company should have a server in their physical location. How are you now protecting yourself against the hurricane or the fire that could happen at any given moment in time? Where's your resiliency? So granted, we may have the technology, and he's absolutely right, we do have it, but if you are not innovating on top of it, it is useless to you. So the question you should not be asking us is whether or not we have the technology infrastructure in place. It's whether or not you are employing the proper principles in your organization to leverage that infrastructure.
I can do it. It's called woman power. Thank you very much.